A beloved animated classic gets a live action treatment, worth it or not? As a longtime How to Train Your Dragons fan, I'm here to give you the answer. There aren't too many people who know more about How to Train Your Dragon than I do, so I think I am the perfect guy to let you know if this live action movie is worth your time. First up, who is this movie for? For younger viewers, this story still revolves around empathy, non-violence, and finding your place in the world. And Toothless still steals hearts, just now in a more texturized, high reality type of way. For the OGs, Gen Z, and millennials, this is your nostalgia trip. If you're like me and you grew up with the original trilogy, this feels like revisiting Burke through a more cinematic lens. Expect the emotional resonance, but not reinvention. It's more of a warm hug than a new spark. And honestly, it's also for casual moviegoers. If you never saw the original, it still works as a standalone world-building fantasy adventure. But I will say some of the more emotional beats might not hit as hard if you don't have that previous emotional connection. Basically, if you're in it for dragons, bonds, and the feels, you're in the right place. Now, if you wanted a bold new take on How to Train Your Dragons, this isn't the movie for you.
Here it comes!
Before going to see the live action, I did rewatch the 2010 How to Train Your Dragons, and I will say a lot of these scenes were shot for shot accuracy. There weren't too many important things that they changed. Now, they did go and add other things in, like an extra layer to Hiccup and Stoic's relationship. They spent a little more time on that, but for the most part, if you like the 2010 story, it's the same story. Let's talk about the visuals of the movie. If I got to give the visuals for this movie a rating, this is definitely a 10 out of 10. It looked great. And I think the thing that a lot of people were most afraid of and skeptical about was how are the CGI dragons going to look? I was skeptical about it myself, but after seeing that trailer, I was sold. But a lot of times, you guys know, movies put a little more effort into the trailers and then actually don't carry that same quality over to the movies. But this movie had the same quality. Toothless, Stormfly, and all the other dragons looked very, very real. And in the original animated film, there are certain things that they do with the dragons that might look a little cartoony or weird if you adapted that into the live action. So they made those changes to make things make more sense. For instance, the Gronkle, the wings are really small, the way it flies, it just looks dumb and cartoony and clunky, and it's supposed to because it's animated. But in the real one, they changed the proportions a little bit to make it look a little more realistic. And I love that. I think another visual limit of this not being animated is in the animated film, when you see these Vikings, specifically Stoic, they are huge, powerful, strong, and as this being a live action adaptation, you're limited to using regular humans. So when you see Stoic in this movie, he is big, he is daunting, but not as much so as he is in the actual live action. Stoic is larger than life, scarier than all the other Vikings, and you can tell that just by looking at him. But I do think they did a good job of showing that through his actions and his personality and the things that he does, but that is a limit that you can't get without animation. Next up, let's talk about the acting. I think Mason Thames did a very good job throughout this entire film acting as Hiccup. He did a really good job of nailing his quirky teenage vulnerability, how he's very awkward and weird in a lot of times. I will say some of his sarcasm didn't land the way I wanted it to. As we know, the original voice actor for Toothless, Jay Baruchel, is literally famous for his sarcasm. That's what he does as a voice actor. And I feel like Mason Thames just couldn't nail it on the same level. There were a couple lines that he delivered and I knew it was supposed to be sarcastic because I've seen the movie a lot of times, but I don't know if the audience who saw this for the first time could tell that it was supposed to be sarcasm. Gerard Butler did an incredible job as Stoic, and I feel like the reason why is because he's the original voice of Stoic. He knows how to play Stoic better than anybody else, so bringing his voice and putting a live action visual to that worked so well. Now, as we know, there was a ton of controversy around Nico Parker playing Astrid in this movie. When the cast was first announced, a lot of people were mad that it wasn't a blonde-haired, blue-eyed Viking girl playing Astrid. They said she was going to ruin the movie, that it was going to ruin the tone, it wasn't going to work. After watching this movie, Nico did an incredible job. She did a great job as Astrid. Her acting was spot on. She brought that intense, fun, crazy vibe that Astrid has and still pushed the story and Toothless along great. Honestly, I don't think there were any issues. When it comes down to her costume and her design, she felt like a Viking. I don't feel like she had to have blonde hair and blue eyes in order for this series to work. Watching it, it looked perfectly fine. And I feel like for the people who never watched the original, they wouldn't even realize that Astrid was supposed to be anything different. Nico did a great job. But while we're talking about casting, I always thought it was weird that everybody had an issue with Nico Parker playing Astrid, but they didn't have an issue with Rough Nut and Tough Nut not being twins. That's a pretty big difference there, and I don't understand why it was such a big deal that Nico Parker was Astrid, but they're literally not twins. That's their whole thing. And I mean, I get it, Rough Nut and Tough Nut don't have a huge role in the first movie, but in the second and third movies, they do play a pretty significant part, in them not being twins kind of does change things a little bit. But nobody cares about that. They just wanted to be racist. Now, one of the main differences I will say this movie had from the original is the tone is a little bit darker. Not a lot, but a little bit. To the point where I could even see this movie being rated PG-13 instead of PG. At the end of the movie, where they go up against the Red Death and they have that final fight, that could be intense for some younger viewers. I liked it. I thought it was awesome. But the tone was definitely more dark and intense than the original movie. Don't get me wrong, that Red Death fight was very, very intense in the animated movie, but it had a different level of intensity, maybe because it was live action. We're watching this dragon eat other dragons and kill humans. Obviously, there was no blood or gore or anything, but you can put those pieces together even if you're very young, and it might be a little intense for younger viewers. The movie isn't out yet, but after looking online, it seems like the general consensus of this movie is that it was very, very good and everyone enjoyed it. However, there is that audience out there that says it feels very faithful and respectful, but it doesn't have much originality. And to that point, I say, I don't think it's supposed to have a lot of originality. For a live action remake, I think they did a really good job of keeping the same themes, same story, same ideals, and turning it into live action. We don't need this to be original. I'm talking to you, live action Lilo and Stitch. If you're gonna remake a movie, just remake the movie. We don't need you to turn it into something completely different. When I buy my ticket for How to Train Your Dragons, I wanna go see How to Train Your Dragons. I don't want y'all to mix it up and turn it into something completely new and different. It's not what I bought my ticket for. If you wanna make a new movie, make an original film. This wasn't supposed to be an original film. This was supposed to be a remake. So for all the people saying that this wasn't original enough, I don't know what you wanted. A remake isn't supposed to be original. And let's take it a little bit further. It is original in its own rights. There are a couple scenes that did get added on. I can understand it feeling a little bit bloated with adding those extra 25 minutes of runtime, but I think those small moments and scenes that they added did do a good job of building that bond between Stoic and Hiccup and kind of showing their relationship on a deeper level, which will have bigger implications once we get to How to Train Your Dragons 2 and we see how their relationship has grown and have they built and who they've turned into. These extra scenes that we got will really help us understand the weight of that once we get further into their lives and further into this story. As of right now, the sequel is slated for 2027 for the live action How to Train Your Dragons 2. And I'll tell you right now, How to Train Your Dragons 2 is my favorite movie of all time. I think it's absolutely incredible. It really is the perfect movie. So the way that they nailed this movie, if they can bring that same energy to How to Train Your Dragons 2, we might have the greatest live action remake of all time on our hands. And yes, that is full bias on my part. Overall, to answer the question, should you see this movie? It is a resounding yes. Go watch this movie. If you've never seen How to Train Your Dragons before, or if you're a longtime fan of the series and you just want to get yourself reintroduced to it, this is great for either of that. I think they did everything with the perfect amount of respect, intentionality, and they made one of the best live action remakes I've ever seen, and I definitely think you should go see it. But hey, let me know what you thought. Did this movie capture your heart the same way the 2010 movie did? Let me know in the comments. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll catch you in the next one. I'm out. Peace.